So this is a run through of our annual report, the state of project management. This is a piece of research that we do every year and have been doing so for about 5 years now, where we collect data from lots of organizations, lots of people take part, and really gives an insight into the current state of project management. So really, this is an opportunity to step through some of the key findings from that, and also hopefully provide you with some food for thought yourselves as you consider your own organisation and how your organisation can benefit from this data. So just very, very briefly, who are we? So Wellingtone, we're a project management consultancy. We're based in Windsor in the UK. We have offices in Spain and Ireland as well. Uniquely, we are the only organisation that is both a Microsoft Gold partner for project and portfolio management, as well as being an accredited training provider for the APM. So as I said, we're very interested in project management in terms of maturity of organizations, where everyone is, what they can do to develop their project management maturity. As an organization, we work with all sorts of different clients, a very eclectic mix here as an example. The one thing all these organizations have in common is they're all running projects and all looking to improve their project management maturity. So let's get on and look at the data for this year. So the report has just been published, and 111 organizations took part. Of the people that were taking part, they provided some information about themselves. So just in summary, a lot of the people who took part, project management practitioners, very experienced, 2/3 have more than 11 years experience. The sorts of roles that people are performing, 22% project managers, 15% program managers, a third being within the PMO, and of course there's other roles as well that people identify that they would have, but very much saying that the people who participated in this, very much a group of professional project management practitioners, most of whom are employees of mid to large size organizations. And just for fun, the qualification that most people have is Prince 2. So those are the sort of people who took part. What's the findings? What have we discovered? Let's look at some of the key headlines. How often are projects completed on time? How often are projects completed within budget? And how often do they deliver their full benefits? Some fundamentals here are for any organisation. Are we finishing our projects on time? Are we getting the benefits that were all promised at the beginning? And have we done it for the right amount of money? The figures are pretty constant year on year. In this year, we're saying about 30%, 29% are completed on time, 40% deliver their benefit, and 43% come in on budget, which it's not good figures, is it? Let's be honest. I think people can do, we would hope that we'd see better performance than those sorts of figures. Then when you ask the same group of people, has your organization got a track record of success? We've got a slight rose-tinted glasses view on this, insofar as 47%, yes, we do. We're pretty good. Although they've originally already said that, we're not actually finishing projects on time, within budget, and delivering the benefit. Now, for a lot of organizations, hitting a deadline is usually quite transparent. We've achieved that or not. Hitting the budget, usually quite transparent. Have we achieved that? Yes or no? It's the benefits piece and benefits realization, making sure that we complete projects, not just for the sake of it, but so they actually deliver the benefit that we were all promised X months ago. That often does get forgotten. So one of the key things I often say to project managers on a regular basis, must keep an eye on the prize. What is the benefit we're trying to achieve from this project, rather than just focusing on the scope? So the benefit we want to achieve is delivered by completing the scope of work. Hopefully there's a business case or project proposal type document at the beginning that outlines the benefits, and hopefully they are measurable. Have we achieved them? Financial benefit is the easiest to measure, and there's always a challenge in identifying measurable benefits. I want to improve employee satisfaction, or I want to improve our brand reputation. Can be difficult, more difficult to measure. but we must be clear about what the benefits are for each of our projects. So hopefully that this makes you feel slightly better, that you're not alone in sometimes not projects finishing on time and within budget. Actually, the figures are quite low. So what are the challenges that people face? So again, this is a set of questions we've asked for year on year. And normally, number one challenge is poorly trained project managers. This year, it's flipped with its the one that normally comes in second, which is attempting to run too many projects. So both probably resonate with you insofar as for most organizations, we look at each project in isolation. Let's say we even have a good business case for each project. We look at each of those business cases and we say, yeah, that's a great idea. Let's do that. And no one's really adding up the total demand for resource for all these projects that we keep approving. So attempting to run too many projects, and then giving those projects to people who are probably an SME, a subject matter expert, enthusiastic, committed, but may not have been given the chance to skill up in project management tools and techniques, how to plan being a key one. We often find that organizations, their ability to plan work is quite poor. So we can go further down the list. Inconsistency in approach. So what I'm always looking for is for any organization to have a defined project management methodology that's scalable to reflect different sizes of projects, and projects of a similar size, complexity, risk, cost should be run in a similar way if they are the same type. You know, we might have agile projects, sure, we might have traditional, don't like the term traditional, but waterfall projects. But for all projects of a similar type, they should follow the same approach and have that consistency in approach. So again, this list might resonate with you, some of the challenges that people face. So we then looked at project management processes versus how difficult are they to embed. So which of these processes provide the best value, but actually which of them are the biggest challenge? And we can see here that those with the highest value and the lowest difficulty, they're the ones to maybe to focus on, some low-hanging fruit, to use a bit of business speak, and that includes stakeholder engagement, risk management, planning, and going further down that list, change control. So for any organization looking to make a step change in their project management maturity, these might be the areas some early areas to get some wins. Agree a defined approach to risk management. Look at our approach to planning. Upskill on tools like Microsoft Project and just planning techniques. Ensure that each project does follow a change control process as well. And of course, stakeholder engagement. Let's build a communications plan for each of our projects as well. Now, over on that right-hand side, we see those things that have a value but are difficult to undertake. Benefits realization, I mentioned that earlier. Resource management, how much resource do we need to do all these projects? And project prioritization. So if I was in a position where I was developing the project management maturity for an organization, I probably would focus on those things on the left-hand side with high value, that left top quadrant first, get those sorts of things embedded before then looking to tackle things like resource management, benefits realization, and project prioritization. So I've mentioned maturity. You may be familiar with the standard project management maturity model. There's a number of them out there. This one here, 1 to 5, level 1, we've got projects. We take an ad hoc approach. We bumble our way along. We might be enthusiastic, but we haven't really got much structure. Level 2 is when an organization says, hang on a minute, for our big projects, let's at least agree a defined approach, a consistent approach to selecting, planning, running, and closing projects. We might even put together a gated process. So approving projects, then approving the plan, approving to go into implementation, approving to go into closure, and so on. Level 3 is really where we need to be targeting, whether it's a large project or a small local project or a department project. There should be that consistency in approach. That's the goal for a lot of organizations as a minimum, to get ourselves to level 3. So how do we achieve that? Well, let's look at what people think. First of all, we asked people about, are you satisfied with the current level of maturity in your organization? This figure is growing by the year. So currently 52% of respondents are somewhat or very dissatisfied with the current level of maturity in their organization, project management maturity. And as we've found that year on year, this is slowly creeping up. It started at 45% back in 2016, and every year it goes up a few percentage points. Either that means that we're getting worse at running projects, or hopefully, actually, I think what it does mean is more and more people are becoming aware of what good project management is, and that their organization is some way short of good project management. So being more positive, the flip side, a third, 35%, are somewhat or very satisfied with the current level of maturity. So that means 2/3 of organizations, there's definitely a need, well, given the views of the respondents, there's definitely a need to improve maturity. People tend to score themselves quite highly, though. 70% think their maturity within their own department is at least 3, so that third level I mentioned earlier, and a half think their organization is level 3 or more. I think that's optimistic. From our experience, I would say that suggests to be slightly more optimistic. Certainly than the you know, if we had high maturity, then hopefully our number of projects finish on time, within budget, with benefit. Of course, high maturity doesn't guarantee success, but I would expect that to have better data than we saw in that first slide. So we do want to improve our maturity. How do we do it? Well, here's some examples. These are just examples of what good maturity might mean, characteristics, if you like. There's many characteristics, but I've picked out 4. The first is how often is a defined methodology, a defined agreed approach to selecting, planning, running, and closing our projects, how often is that applied? In a mature organization, we'd expect the answer to be all the time. 61% mostly or always apply a defined methodology. As part of that, we'd expect there to be a scoping document explaining this is what we're going to do, this is what we're not going to do, this is why we're going to do it, this is the benefits, return on investment, this is who's going to be involved, this is how much money we need, this is how long it's going to take, all this kind of great stuff in our scoping documentation. We might call that, if we're using a Prince 2 term, a PID, a project initiation document. If we're using APM terminology, we might call it a PMP, project management plan. We might just call it our scoping document, our requirements document. Always expect to have that for a project of a reasonable size, of course. And again, 61% do. That's great for them, but it suggests an awful lot aren't. Another one here, are project schedules baselined so that performance can be tracked? So what we're looking to do here is build a project plan during the planning stage of the life cycle. And then once we approve that plan, we get on and implement. Now, if you were a project manager and asked you, how are you getting on with your project? You might say, oh, Vince, I'm 45% complete. I'm 72% complete. That's interesting information, but it's only kind of one-dimensional. If you said to me, I'm Vince, I'm 50% complete, but by now I should be 65, 42, 98. That gives me a much clearer understanding of where we are. So you're not only saying where you are, you're saying, comparing that to where you thought you were going to be. And that's what we want in terms of timescale, in terms of budget, resource usage, scope. How are we doing compared to a original target? We call that target our baseline. So we're comparing actual progress with that original baseline. We're 45% complete. By now we thought we'd be 50% complete. Some things haven't gone quite as we hoped. That initial plan is never going to be perfect, but it gives you that frame of reference. So again, only half of people are baselining their projects. For me, that number again is way too low. And then finally, are we doing some risk management? 60% say they always or mostly engage in risk management. Risk management is a topic that often project managers are notoriously not so good at. One of the things I recommend is actually changing the language. If you say to people, we're going to do a risk management workshop, that might be an opportunity for everyone to come up with an excuse to go and do something else. If you ask people, what are your concerns? What are your concerns about doing this project? You've come up with then into a much more natural language, a much more natural conversation about genuine things that could go wrong. So often I would recommend having that conversation first with people. You know, what are your concerns in doing this project? Then as a project manager, you can collate that data and build a risk log based on some real conversations. Excuse me. So let's look at maturity drivers. How do we improve our project management maturity? You'll see that we're using the term PPM, project and portfolio management maturity. So lots of different areas that we can work on. First one is methodology. Let's have that defined, consistent approach to selecting, planning, running, closing our projects with appropriate governance. That is defined by our project management methodology. Someone needs to own that methodology. Someone needs to champion that methodology. Someone needs to train people in that methodology. Someone needs to ensure we're following the right governance. Who is that? Typically the PMO, the Project Management Office. There's lots of other things a PMO should be doing, but having a PMO providing that continuity across the organization, championing best practice project management is a key pillar as well. The third one we always look at is technology. Let's leave technology. Let's make the best use of technology to ensure that our project teams can collaborate, can share documents, can share their project plans, can share their risk logs, their list of concerns, and be effective. What we don't want is a project manager who's spending a day a week collating manual project reports. That isn't efficient, and it's not a great use of their time. And similarly, that goes for the PMO as well. Why is the PMO spending 4 days a month manually collating slide decks when we could automate all this reporting? So rather than spending our time collating data, we could spend our time analyzing the data. So technology enables us to do that. It enables teams to work effectively and enables us to automate activity that really is low value. And then the final element is training and support. So it's great that we've got a methodology, it's great we've got some good technology, and it's great that we've got a PMO, but if project managers are unaware of these things or have not been trained in the technology, trained in the methodology, then we're not going to get anywhere. So making sure project managers are trained, key, program managers, of course. And the other area I would also really focus on is project sponsors. Do our sponsors know their job? Are they aware of the role of sponsor versus being a line manager? So they need training as well. And often for us, from our experience, that is often delivered through kind of a half-day course to senior leaders saying, this is your role as a sponsor, this is the behaviors you should exhibit, this is what you should expect from your project manager, and really making sure that they understand their role just as much as project managers do. So if we're looking to make a step change in our project management maturity, we could just embrace one of these areas, but in actual fact, we'd strongly recommend thinking, considering, and doing some work in each of these 4 areas, bring them all up together to develop our maturity. So one of those areas we talked about is the PMO. So let's look at the PMO. First of all, on the right-hand side, we've got what is it that the PMO does? So project status reporting, the classic, we produce a monthly reporting slide deck. Maintaining the list of projects, so we talk about the project register. Show me the list of all our live projects. A fundamental question that I often ask organizations when I start working with them is, a very simple one, is how many projects have you got? It's amazing how many organizations struggle to answer that question because there isn't one defined list, and that's what we need a PMO to manage that list. Going further down here, we've got looking after the methodology, tick, tick, tick. These are all good standard things. The other thing I would say as well is that for projects that are being run by an SME, a subject matter expert, the PMO may well provide a supporting, mentoring role. Whereas for our larger projects, that role might flip, where we've got a professional, quote unquote, professional project manager running the project, rather the PMO being there to support and mentor. The hat might change. We might be actually performing more of an assurance role, making sure that project's being run in the right way. So our relationship with different projects should be different based on the scale of the project and the level of experience in the people running it. But anyway, you can see here a list of standard things that project PMOs are undertaking. Some of them low down the list actually could be very important and high value. So tracking project benefits and benefits realization, helping with resource management, looking at dependencies between projects. These are some of those things that are potentially more difficult, but have a huge amount of value if done correctly. A couple of things you'll notice actually here is that most organizations do have a PMO. 90%, 89, 90% of organizations have a PMO, but a lot of them are quite new. So there's an element here. We've got lots of immature PMOs who maybe don't get the chance to develop and provide their full service catalog to their organization. So it is important to think about what is it that we want our PMO to do, what's the value that we want it to bring, and what are the activities that we want the PMO to focus on from this list. Let's look at the technology then. So we asked the question about, does your organization have access to real-time key performance indicators? So over 50% don't. And this goes back to the conundrum of manually creating reports every month. And in fact, over a third of organizations, or a third of the respondents, spend 1 or more days a month manually putting project status reports together. Now, bearing in mind our respondents can be project managers, program managers, the PMO, what we're seeing is everyone, or a third of all those different types, role types, are spending 1 or more days a month manually collating reports. So it's just an example of an area that really we should be using technology to eliminate this waste of our time. It's not a waste of report, because the reports themselves are highly valuable, but there's much more efficient ways to deliver that that data. So we did ask people about software tools. What software tools are typically used to manage plans and manage resource. I'm not going to go through all the data points there, but you can see a lot of organizations are using Microsoft Project, and some organizations are using an enterprise resource tool or enterprise project management tool. But still, the numbers are quite low. We expanded the questions on this a little bit more to talk about informal projects and informal work. We asked a simple question about, have you got effective technology to collaborate on informal projects? And about a quarter, 25%, say they don't have anything in place. Now, one thing I will highlight is the people who answered this survey, they did that before COVID-19, before the lockdown. We did ask people a question about, do you think people will work more from home in the future? That question now is kind of redundant. But certainly that has also emphasized the need for collaborative tools. A lot of organizations, of course, have been using Zoom and Microsoft Teams, and really had to embrace those tools. And we obviously, as a Microsoft Gold partner, we focus on Microsoft Teams, a great collaboration tool. But of course, there's other things we can do as well on top of that. So looking at tools, and this is just as for those of you who've got Office 365 in your organization, you may or may not be aware of some of the tools that you've got. Microsoft Teams I've mentioned. At the low end of the scale, we've got Microsoft To Do, which is a very simple app. On top of that, with the next option in terms of complexity is Microsoft Planner. So that is part of the Office 365 suite. You may already have that app. it may already be available to you. And that's a really simple way of listing tasks, assigning tasks to people. You get a kind of a Kanban board type view with that, and it's really simple, accessible tool. Building on that, lots of our corporate clients would use Microsoft Project Online for the full PPM solution. So we're using Microsoft Project as a planning tool. All that data is going in one place, so we can look across resource demand across the whole organization. We use this to maintain our project register, and certainly projects within the corporate radar, we'd want this level of sophistication. In between those two is a new product from Microsoft, newish, it's been out for a little while, Project for the Web. So this is a very user-friendly solution, providing some of the power of Microsoft Project, but in a way that makes it much more accessible to people who aren't quote-unquote professional project managers or project teams. So a great collaboration tool. Anyway, back to the data. So what does the future look like? Well, we ask questions about, where do you see, particularly say for the PMO, where do you see that going? Are you going to get more people in your PMO? Are you going to take on more responsibilities? Are you going to increase the perceived value? So lots of positivity on all these fronts. What we are seeing, and this has been a trend for the last few years, is 57% which see an increase in headcount, yet higher numbers for more responsibility and hopefully greater value. So if we're having to take on more responsibility, but not getting more people, or proportionally not getting as many people, that means we have to be more productive. We need to be more efficient. We need to be better, faster, quicker at the way that we operate, focusing on the high value activity, which brings me back down to my conversation about technology, leveraging the technology to enable us to be more efficient. We asked people about the future of work. Again, I'll mention that this was obviously these questions were asked ahead of the COVID shutdown, but large proportion of people think that project work will increase. 78% of respondents feel that people will need more project management skills in their work anyway. 75% are thinking that collaboration tools, the need for those will increase. And also over 50% think that more work will be organized around small informal teams. And that's certainly a trend that we're seeing as well, is that organizations are becoming more project-centric, not just for the high-value corporate projects, but further down there as well, that work is being organized in a project-centric way, informal teams working together, and therefore defining an approach for an informal team or a small project or a large project. As an organization, we want to give guidance on the approach that they should be taking and the tools they should be using.